Hello, if you don't know me, I'm Mr. Wood,
I'm Mrs. Powell.
and we're just going to take a few minutes to tell you about the A-Level Religious Studies course. So the A-Level Religious Studies course is made up of 3 units. There's Philosophy of Religion, there's Religion and Ethics, and Developments in Christian Thought. So all 3 of these areas will be partly familiar to you from the GCSE course, but there's also quite a lot of new things in there. So I teach the Philosophy of Religion part of the course. In this course, we're going to study some of the biggest and most difficult questions that humans have ever thought of. Starting off with a really good question on what is real, and we look back all the way back to the ancient Greeks and Plato and Aristotle to consider what's the nature of reality. How do we know what is real and what isn't real? And which leads us to consider questions about the soul and its relationship to the mind and the body. We'll consider questions that you might be a little bit familiar with, such as the existence of God and the problem of evil. But then we'll also consider things that we haven't studied before. We'll consider what is religious experience, and we'll look at different types of religious experience and whether they're genuine or not. We'll ask questions such as, is God outside of time? And whether it makes sense to say that anything is outside of time. We'll also look very carefully at the idea of religious language and in the broader context of what any kind of language means and how language has any kind of meaning to different groups of people. So in that part of the course, we do have some really difficult questions, questions that humans still struggle to provide convincing answers to. But to me, that's what really makes the philosophy of religion particularly enjoyable, is sometimes considering questions that we're not quite sure what the right answer is.
So I teach the religion and ethics part of the course, and in this section we look at religious and non-religious ethical theories. So ethics being the study of right and wrong and how we decide what is actually right and wrong. So, for example, we look at a number of relevant questions. So, does ethics have a place in the world of business and capitalism? There are those who would say that ethics has no place in the world of business and it's simply about profit. But whether that is the case or not might be something that we can consider. How do we decide if someone has the right to die? So this is building on the work that we do at GCSE linked to euthanasia. Is it a religious set of teachings that give us the best guidance, or is it a non-religious theory that might help us decide whether that is the right thing to do? We also consider religious teachings on sex and whether or not those teachings, which are often viewed as very conservative in nature, actually have any relevance in the modern world. Or again, are non-religious theories able to give us far more guidance in a more relevant way? We consider what is conscience, that small voice in our head that we're all aware of, but we look at whether that's a religious sense or is it a psychological part of our brain which is helping us make decisions. And then lastly on this slide, we talk about probably the fundamental question in ethics is when we say something is good or bad, right or wrong, what do we actually mean by that? And that is actually fundamental to our whole understanding of ethics.
So the third section of the course is Development in Christian Theology. The teaching of this is shared between myself and Mrs. Powell. And this is woven throughout years 12 and 13, so all 3 units are combined together. So some of the questions we consider, what does it mean to be a human? And we look at the work of one of the most influential of all Christian thinkers, St. Augustine, and looking at his struggles with how he lived his life and what it meant to try and live a good life as he understood it. We'll consider questions about who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. When we're looking at different perspectives on this, because the point of the unit is to consider how these ideas have changed over time. And when we move into sort of looking at the 20th and 21st centuries, we'll consider issues to do with feminist theology and whether Christianity is a sexist religion. But we'll also look at key political theories such as Marxism and the influence that that has had on Christian thinking. And all the way we're seeing how Christian thinking, Christian ideas, Christian theology has developed in conjunction with other ideas from the world around us.
And in the modern world, we also consider questions such as, is Christianity the one true faith? Or are all religions true? Is that even a possibility? In an increasingly multicultural, pluralistic worldview, that idea of Christianity having the truth is quite controversial. Linked to that, we look at something called secularization and secularism, which is the idea that religion gets gradually pushed out of the public sphere. And we'll ask the question, well, what place does religion have in an increasingly secular world, if indeed that's the right question to be asking at all, because it may not necessarily be an increasingly secular or non-religious world. And the last question on there is looking at religion from a psychological perspective. So it's Freud's view that religion is nothing more than wish fulfillment. Religion is something that we have created to help us cope with guilt, to help us cope with the uncertainty of our everyday lives, which at times can be very, very challenging. So a very varied side of the course. So hopefully that gives you an insight into the three distinct strands of the A-level course. But what this slide is here to demonstrate is, although they are distinct strands, there is significant overlap between the three sections. There's significant links with other A-level subjects that you may choose to study, for example, sociology, geography, psychology, sociology, English. All of those areas come into play when we're considering a number of these questions. And certainly as you progress through the course, you get a real sense of the understanding that all of these areas contribute and complement each other. And once you finish the full course, you really see it as a coherent whole, because they do complement each other.
So finally, you might want to consider, well, what would be the benefit of taking an A-level in religious studies? Well, really, the benefit is it can really take you wherever you want to go. As a subject, it has so many connections with other subjects. It's an excellent way of understanding why different people have different ideas, different perspectives, different worldviews, why people have different ethics and different moralities. And it's a great course to study if you're trying to understand the world that you see around you, the people in it, and the events going on in it. Whether you're considering whether you want to be a youth worker or a barrister, whether you want to work in education, whether you want to work in politics, RS is a really good course to get you started in that. If you search, as it says on the screen, if you search on YouTube for TRS UK channel, you'll see all those videos that you can see, or you can use the QR code there. There's lots of little videos there of people talking about the role that the study of religious studies made to their ongoing career. We hope you found that useful. If you do have any questions about the A-level course, or you want to find out a little bit more information, then feel free to come and speak to myself or Mrs. Powell, or to send an email to us. Thank you.